All right, it's time to start adding in some texture, some details, some cleanup. You can also see, between the last video and this one, maybe a few colors have changed. You'll notice that the top of this chair kind of has some very simple color changes to help push it in the right direction. These pillows, I've changed the color of one of the pillows here. The floor is dark, and I'll show you why in just a moment. You'll also notice that I've reduced the number of blinds, and the reason is because it's just going to be easier for me to create one blind with cleanup and then just clone it a number of times. So if you have blinds like I do, you might want to hide some of them. Try things with one. Anything you do with one, though, of course, you can extrapolate to any number of blinds. Okay, so let's get right to it, and I'll show you again kind of how all this stuff has worked. Again, I've already done all of my cleanup, but I'll show you what I did during the cleanup process as I expose these layers. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to deal with here is the floor. So if we go all the way back into our just our general room, you'll notice that I've darkened the floor here. Now, why have I done that? Well, the reason that I've done that is because I have built a hardwood floor over here. This is very easy to do, by the way. Here's what you would do. You would just grab a rectangular tool, and you would take a brush, just a AAA drawer is probably fine. There's your floorboards, right? If you want to make cuts in them, or you just use maybe an eraser. Something like that as you're putting them together. Now, if you want to add color to those, I recommend actually there's if you've got like a hairbrush or just anything really that makes a streak is good. Let's just grab some brown here just to show you. But oops. Yeah, you can kind of see how that goes, and it makes a pretty reasonable facsimile of wood. So the moral of the story here is once you have this, you can then take it and distort this. What else can we maybe add to this flooring? We can add reflections, and again, just to do reflections is very, very simple. All you're doing is grabbing your black brush. These are just rudimentary reflections, right? We're not really even worried about lighting yet. Right, if I want to give that floor some shine, I would do something like this, and then I would do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then the more blurred this is, obviously the more matte the floor is. So something like that, and then you might just take an eraser and mess around with this. This is a really simple way of going about this. This is not the only thing that you're going to be doing to this floor. This is just a proto layer to suggest that the floor is a reflective surface. Another thing that this room is missing is trim. We should have probably a line of trim to sort of separate the flooring from the walls. That's pretty typical in a home. All right, so what else do we have here? We've got our blinds, and we've got our cleanup for our blinds, which is just a nice soft brush. But look what happens when we turn all these on. Not too shabby. We could probably get rid of that line work now, which is kind of nice. And there's our blind top. We've got a little bit of work there too. Then we've got our planter sands. What happens if we clean them up? Again, this is just using a brush and a lasso tool. I've also, or a polygonal lasso tool to create the boards. One other thing that I've done here is I've just created, I took one of those circles that I created earlier and I added these to sort of imply that perhaps a plant had been there but had been removed. Okay, let's go on to the frames. We'll get back to the plants in a little bit. So for the frames, you'll notice I added a little bit of an effect on the fill here, just a little bit of a shadow effect. And I've done the same thing on the frames. I've just added a drop shadow. And you can adjust those shadows as you see fit. Okay. And then I've done some cleanup on the frames and on the butterflies. Much sharper. I've also added a little bit of a glass texture to give those a little bit more visual interest. All right, so now we go back to the case. Again, working back to front, you're just going to hide things that you don't need, but we're just going to kind of blow through this a little bit. So the books, the bookshelves. First, we've got leaves on our books here. Now we've got covers on our books. And again, just striped with a brush and keeping in tune with the three main colors that we have here. This is just a color shift. I've added in a little gold reflection for this object. And then here I've added a little side panel for our shelf, just using that same sort of technique that we used for the wood on the floor. But I've added a little bit more of kind of a mahogany, kind of a reddish wood sort of a look. And I've matched this color with this color over here so that these do match a little bit better. And I also added a few little side accents that I thought might look kind of nice. Make it look like there's wood sections that have been added into the shelves. More books. Again, you can kind of see just taking the same thing and I'm moving it around and changing the colors a little bit. And then here I added in some reflections for this object. Remember, think about what you're reflecting. This is reflecting the top of this. This is reflecting the top, or this is reflecting the bottom of the circles here. And then I've just got a bunch of different layers of shelf cleanup for my bookcase. And my bookcase is in pretty good shape. Slippers, I've painted right over them. Again, don't be afraid to use your mixer brush tool to mix the lines in with the rest of your paint, just like we did in Project 3. Here's my cleanup for the chair. Again, don't forget you can take your pillows off. This is using mixer brush stuff here too. Here's the mixer brush, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. Right, that's just pushing the line work around until you've got something that looks satisfactory to you. This is kind of nice because it allows you to keep some of the line work and blur some of those soft edges, which is kind of nice. Let me zoom out here. And let's see what those pillows look like cleaned up. There they are. else do we have? We've got our legs, our table. We've got our tray. And then we've cleaned up our trash here too. Sounds funny, but there it is. We've got our mug. Let's zoom in and take a look at that. Here it is all cleaned up, right? Make sure you get some specularity on the plate, on the inside of the mug, and we've got a number of different color layers in here too, right? So we've got the T, which is a soft brush, and then we have just a few little lasso tool splashes to sort of suggest the reflections inside of here. And then we've got a little bit of metal work here on the spoon, and we'll throw a little steam in there to show how that's going to look. Let's move over to our side table. How did that end up looking? Pretty simple. I've added in these lines here to sort of imply that this is made from different, big planks of wood. We've got our lamp, nice and cleaned up here. And then I added a little bit of a glass effect. Don't forget to include any sorts of reflections that you would see on that surface. Let's not forget our frame. Cleaned up here. I made this into a metal frame. If you zoom in to look at the picture, you can see it's just a bunch of squiggles of paint, just black and white. All right, let's go over to our potted plants. First, we're adding in soil, then we're cleaning up these pots. And I've just used the same pot and added it a couple of spots. Here's the plants. First, I've added in, just using my lasso tool, just some squiggles and fills to give some leaves. And then some leaves on top of that. For this plant, I've actually addressed the leaves individually. And I made a leaf, and then what I did was I copied it a bunch of times. And then I did a little bit of paint over to darken that up. A couple of dead leaves off to the side for a little touch. Then we've got this plant here, and I've done this with it. Again, each one of these, you can just sort of draw around the outside. Remember, there's going to be light shining through this window, so you want to make sure that you have subsurface scattering on these leaves if you were going to do this. So if I back up here, you can see the whole entire room has some textures on it. Some of this is flattened out, unfortunately, by some of the line work, so we're probably going to want to turn that off between this video and the next. But that's pretty close to the finish. All we need now is a little bit of ambient occlusion, and we need to address some of the major lighting in the room with the window. But most of this is ready to go. Really, if yours was in this sort of a state, this might be fine. But we're going to take it all the way to the end and do a nice job with the lighting to show how that's going to look if you took it even further to make it as good as you could. Within reason. All right. We'll stop here for now.